Hello.
Hello. Lynette.
I know I need to change my setting. Oh, Alyssa, did you stop recording already?
Oh, good.
Or do you need
Hear
me?
me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear us or not yet?
Yeah, it was truly just that my volume was all the way turned down.
Okay. We're just saying that it seems like it's not recording anymore, which is good. I think. Oh, it is still recording. I just
But we can pause that here. I think you're showing the wrong slide.
We can see your next slide option.
Thanks. Try it again. That's why I've tried it 5 times. Now?
Looks good.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks.
Dropping everyone in. 50 people so far.
It was a
Now we're just waiting for a few more people to join us.
romantic situation, and that the defendant
Good evening and welcome. I think we'll start in just a minute.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to start in a few minutes when it looks like everyone who's joining us is here. People are still filtering in. Okay, it looks like we've kind of leveled off, so I think we will start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Alfs. I'm a council member for the town of Portola Valley. I'm here along with my colleague on the council, Sarah Wernikoff. And Sarah and I, since August, have been representing the council on the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee, which has been working to draft a new housing element for the next cycle for Portola Valley. That housing element is due January 1st. And the committee has been working since August and has now created a final draft of our site inventory. And our partners here from our town staff, along with our partners from Urban Planning Partners, are going to be introducing this. So we're here this is a first sort of public airing of that draft, and we're here to get your feedback on it. The ad hoc committee will meet again on May 24th to sort of finalize their recommendation, and eventually this will go to the council. So we really are interested in your feedback here. We want to hear what you think. We want to hear your ideas still. This is still a work in progress, and there will still be opportunities to refine as we move along. So again, thank you for participating, and we look forward to several discussions here. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Carla Violet from Urban Planning Partners, and she will introduce the topic. Thank you, Carla. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording this meeting so that we can share it with your friends, family, neighbors, etc., and they can watch if they're unable to attend tonight. You all are muted right now. We are very eager to hear from you, but we ask that you please stay muted until our breakout room discussion. If you would like to use closed captioning, please look for that button along the bottom of the Zoom window that says live transcript. And if you click on this, you should start to see subtitles at the bottom of your screen to help you follow along. And if you're joining us by phone, you can click *9 to raise your hand, and *6 will unmute. All right, tonight's team, we have from the town, Melvin Gaines, Laura Russell, and Dylan Parker. And we're also joined by several facilitators from Urban Planning Partners and 21 Elements. So you will be seeing them in your breakout rooms. We also have Alyssa Chung helping us with tech support, and her cell number is listed here. It's 510-956-3675. Any issues. All right, so tonight we have a lot of information to share with you, and we're eager to get your feedback. And since there's a lot to cover, we will not have an opportunity for open Q&A, but we will be developing a list of FAQs and posting to the town's website. And this PowerPoint and the recording of the meeting will also be posted on the website after this meeting. Okay, we're going to start off with a live Zoom poll to learn more about who all is in the audience tonight. And we encourage all of you to take this poll. Our goal is to reach a broad base of the community throughout this process. And by gathering demographic info, it will help us understand who we are or are not reaching. And then we can adjust our outreach methods accordingly. And again, if you have any Zoom related issues, you are welcome to call Alyssa here at the number listed below. So just give you a minute or two to finish up that Zoom. It's also in the chat here. I see from Alyssa. Give everyone about 30 more seconds before we move on. Still seeing the numbers move, so I'll give you all a few more seconds to finish up that poll. All right, I'm going to let the poll keep going, but I am going to start us with meeting outcomes. So we have two sets of meeting outcomes tonight. For the attendees, we hope for you all to leave more familiar with the basic requirements of the housing element, to understand the site's inventory and how community input has shaped the process, and for you all to know how to stay involved in the housing element process. And for town staff and consultants, we hope to leave with hearing all of your comments and concerns about the site's inventory, to understand your preferences on design features and zoning standards for multifamily development, and to learn about additional ideas for improving the ADU and JADU process. To kick us off, here's some ground rules for our discussion breakout groups later. There are no right or wrong answers. Make sure to share the space, so step up and step back, and make sure everyone has a chance to speak. And please respect all points of view. Okay, next I'm going to walk us through what is the housing element, and we'll review the RHNA for Portola Valley. The state housing law went into effect in 1969, and it requires that every California city or town and county accommodate its fair share of projected housing needs. Every local jurisdiction has a general plan, which is a blueprint for the community's long-term vision for the future. And it's like a book. So the general plan consists of different chapters, which are called elements. And each element covers a different aspect of the environment, such as land use, housing, open space, or conservation. And the housing element is one of the 7 state required components of the general plan. And a housing element incorporates assigned targets from the state. But it's important to note that while state law requires Portola Valley to plan for a certain number of homes, doing so does not mean all those homes will be built. The town does not build housing, but private and nonprofit developers do. So the town can only make sure the rules are in place so homes can be built. So the policies we put into place have to be feasible and likely result in the units being built. And there are consequences if those units are not built, including more of a loss of local control. It also requires review and approval by the state, and it must be updated every 8 years. For those who are not familiar, RHNA stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, and it is a state mandated process to identify the number of units by affordability level that each jurisdiction must accommodate in the housing element. And each local government must update the housing element and its zoning to show how it plans to accommodate its RHNA. So we're still in the 5th RHNA cycle currently, and we're preparing for the 6th RHNA cycle, which means this is the 6th time all California jurisdictions have had to update their housing element. And the 6th cycle will cover the years 2023 through 2031. So this slide shows the different income limits for a family of 4 in San Mateo County. You can see the very low income families have incomes ranging from 54 to 92,000. Low income are 92 to 146,000, and moderate income families are earning between 146 to 180,000 dollars per year. And for each income category, the state mandates a certain number of units be planned for. So RHNA for the cycle 5 was only 64 units, but the RHNA for cycle 6 will be 253 units. So that's almost 4 times higher. And in the past, the town has been able to satisfy this housing unit need mostly by ADUs. But for this cycle, we will need to consider options beyond accessory dwelling units, just given the number of units required. Now I'm just going to walk you through quickly some of the outreach that was done to date and some of our key findings. The Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee has done extensive community outreach throughout the housing element update process. And for those not familiar, the committee consists of 15 residents appointed by the town council, and they've held 1 to 2 meetings per month since last August. And they've been charged with developing a housing element that complies with state law, that reflects town values, and incorporates best possible planning for safety considerations. There have been regular communications to the community through the town's website and social media. And the town also has an e-notification system with almost 500 subscribers. Okay, to date, the committee has received community input through large meetings, a survey, small focus group meetings, and for all of this outreach, they have achieved truly remarkable participation as shown here. To date, there have been 11 meetings where attendance has ranged from 25 to 165 people. The town also held a community-wide meeting last fall in October with over 70 people. There was a committee of town committees meeting in January of this year, and a housing element survey that was sent out in February that garnered over 700 responses. They've also held 2 focus group meetings last month one on ADUs, and one for property owners interested in upzoning their properties. And for each of these meetings, there is extensive material available on the town's website. Now, what we've heard and learned so far is that the community is very much interested in producing real affordable housing. It is vital to protect local businesses. Equity and fair housing are important. We need to ensure that safety element constraints analysis informs site selection, and wildfire safety in particular is very important. Using town-owned property makes affordable housing more feasible. There is discomfort with upzoning single-family homes if owners are not on board. And lastly, rural character is important, but means different things to different people. Okay, and next, I'm going to dive into a little more detail about the community feedback that we've heard on accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and some of the ideas that we've heard so far. Before I dive in, I just first want to reiterate that, as mentioned before, ADUs and JADUs will not be a complete solution this time to satisfy the RHNA as it has been in the past. HCD, the state, now requires the town to base ADU projections for the future on past performance. So a small increase may be allowable if the town commits to implementing programs to further encourage ADUs and JADUs. So they're still important. It just means that there are other solutions such as upzoning that will be necessary to meet the RHNA target this cycle. Some of the things that we've heard from the community at past meetings is that the town process and regulations currently are pretty cumbersome. The septic requirements and county process are a challenge. Sewer connection can be cost prohibitive. Many residents are not familiar with JADUs, which is a missed opportunity. Pre-approved ADU plans would help streamline the process. And there's some residents who'd be willing to rent to lower income people if they could build and rent a JADU or ADU more easily. So some of the ideas that we've come up with and heard from community members to help address some of those concerns are to revise the town process and handouts for clarity, to hold office hours with specialists like the town geologist for questions that come up on ADUs and JADUs, to create an easy process for building JADUs in existing homes, to match low-income renters with owners through a nonprofit, and lastly, implement an amnesty program to bring ADUs onto the books. Okay, the final portion of this presentation I'll be covering is the sites inventory process. And after that, we'll be going into breakout rooms for more discussion. All right, some of you may be familiar with the slide, but this just walks through the different steps when analyzing sites to accommodate the town's RHNA. The first is just identifying suitable sites, considering things like infrastructure, zoning, environmental constraints like wildfire and geologic safety. Step B is to determine sites appropriate for low and very low income households. Step C is to document the methodology for the number of units that can be built on a site. Step D is to figure out what non-vacant sites are appropriate. And the last step is to determine whether we have enough sites to meet a RHNA or if we need to rezone some sites if there's a shortfall. And as previously mentioned, so this is the draft projection that the committee reviewed. And this shows at the very top that there is a RHNA of 253 units. HCD recommends a buffer of 15 to 30% more capacity to accommodate lower income RHNA, which is the 73 plus the 42 units shown here at the top. So one way to think about this is as a contingency in case things do not go according to plan over the next 8 years. the town is targeting a 20% buffer. So that brings the RENA to 304 units. Now, also shown on this table is the pipeline projects. So there are 52 in the pipeline right now. We are including 87 ADUs. This is all over the next 8 years, and 28 affiliated housing sites in the RENA. And this leaves the town with the challenging task of identifying sites to accommodate the remaining 137 units. So that's with the 20% buffer or contingency. So we're going to walk through the process for these sites. So to tackle this challenge, the ad hoc committee has held 6 meetings on the site's inventory process. It's included meetings focused on fire safety, other types of safety constraints. There was also a pivot in February to analyzing several new ideas from the committee, which I'll go over in the next couple slides. And there were 2 more meetings that talked through the results of this new approach. The last meeting last week was finalizing a recommendation for the draft sites inventory. And just so everyone knows, the recordings and the materials for each of these meetings is also available online. So in summary, there's been much discussion around the topic. All right, so the committee came up with a series of 8 ideas at that February 28th meeting where there was a pivot, and asked staff to analyze each one. So I'm going to review those with you tonight pretty quickly. And more detail, as I said, is on the town's website, but just to give you some context, I want to walk through each of these. The first is the committee asked to explore some new sites, and that included the Glen Oaks Stanford Parcel, the El Mirador behind, it's a site behind Town Hall, and Neely property on Portola Road. Ultimately, we decided to pursue the Glen Oaks site. It is a viable site. However, we'll be reserving Neely for the next cycle, just given some of the complexities. And El Mirador is not likely, just given some complicated ownership information. For number 2, the committee asked to further study potential for mixed use in the town's CC and AP zones while also preserving local businesses. Ultimately, this would not produce many units, so we are not recommending that strategy moving forward. For number 3, further study potential for 2 vacant parcels on Alpine Road in the Nathorst Triangle area. We are moving forward with 3 Nathorst properties that are identified for development. The caveat is that for rezoning those, there was caution against too much density in the Nathorst Triangle. So we need to be careful with that. And there was some strong support for limiting the developments to be no more than 2 stories in height. And there was also support for mixed use development at that location. So I'll be showing you all a map a little bit later that shows those locations. The 4th item was to explore an opt-in approach for property owners to voluntarily upzone. There was a meeting held last month for interested owners, and 6 property owners are interested as a result of that focus group. 4 of the 6 were flagged with potential vegetation management concerns. We're keeping all 6 in the inventory for now until further evaluation can be done. Number 5 is the same as number 4, but this was just investigating dispersing sites using an overlay zone for up to 6 dwelling units per acre. So number 6, it was asked to revisit the list of town-owned properties to see if there was any development potential. Ultimately, we analyzed Ford Field, the town substation, and Blue Oaks as possibilities. Tonight, you will be seeing the site concept prepared for Ford Field, which is a viable affordable housing development location. It would require a minimum of 50 units for financial feasibility purposes. The substation parcel was removed due to an easement and lack of funding. And Blue Oaks was also removed due to wildfire risk, and it was just deemed not appropriate for an affordable housing location. For number 7, consider the town's affordable housing fund for affordable housing incentives. There was broad consensus to move forward with that. And for number 8, revisiting the ADU process to see if additional streamlining is possible. As I mentioned, there was an ADU focus group held last month, and we will be talking through that feedback during our breakout groups. One additional idea was proposed, which was to look at the Ladera Church site, see if more units could be added at Stanford Wedge. And I already mentioned above the town center substation. The Ladera Church parcel was added to the site's inventory. The substation was removed, as I mentioned above. Additional units at Stanford Wedge are not included at this time after further discussions with Stanford representatives. So at that May 2nd meeting, the sites shown here were identified as the draft sites inventory recommended by the committee. They include Ford Field as a 100% affordable housing opportunity site with 50 units. HCD requires a minimum of 20 dwelling units per acre for affordable housing developments. And I'll talk more about that site in a moment. Next is the Glen Oaks parcel owned by Stanford across from the property known as the Wedge. And that site is proposed for 32 residential units. There are 3 other opportunity sites proposed for mixed-use development in the Nathorst Triangle, including the empty parcel next door to Roberts Market, the lot behind Roberts, and the office building at the corner of Nathorst and Alpine Road. And these would likely all be mod or above moderate income, unless a second affordable housing site is needed, in which case the empty parcel could be up to 20 dwelling units per acre. And the remaining 6 sites shown are opt-in sites where the property owners expressed interest in upzoning their property to 6 dwelling units per acre or 20 dwelling units per acre for the Ladera Church property. And again, these would all be moderate or above moderate income, except for Ladera Church, which could qualify as lower income with the 20 dwelling units per acre requirement. So the total number of units shown here is more than the 137 we need, but some of the opt-in sites could be reduced or eliminated after further evaluation. So it's important to keep this in mind. This is an iterative process. So we are still revising and narrowing down to the final list of sites. And that's part of the reason we're having this meeting tonight. And this here is a map of the site's inventory table. It's color coded by type. The pink is town owned. So Ford Field is up in the corner A. There are other opportunity sites in blue, and in the green are the opt-in zoning properties. This map also includes a few shades of gray, which indicate 1, 2, or 3 hazard constraints. So the darker the gray, the more hazards. And just so everyone knows the type of hazards mapped, there were 5 total constraints. There was the 1% annual chance flood zones, fault setbacks, parcels with single evacuation routes, slopes greater than 30%, and least stable soil types. The wildfire was considered for evacuation routes and topography. And the committee considered these hazard constraints maps as part of their site inventory process. And you can see here the majority of the proposed sites are outside any hazardous area, with the exception of a few of the opt-in sites that require further evaluation. So those in green. One site I'd like to walk you all through is Ford Field, since this would be a significant project that could potentially meet most of the lower income RHNA. The ad hoc committee requested a preliminary analysis of the site in March to determine if there was enough space for housing while also keeping the baseball field. We looked at all of the constraints, including there's a 30-foot easement on the site, there's a 75-foot scenic corridor setback, a 55-foot stream buffer. But we realized there is remaining area big enough for a housing development while still preserving the baseball field. So to better understand the site's development capacity, we prepared a conceptual site design shown here. So this is just an example of what could be developed. What's shown here is a site that's about 2.5 acres. It could include 4 apartment buildings, some 2 stories and others 3 stories in height. Each unit would be about 900 square feet and surface parking would be accessed from Alpine Road. Note a portion of the parking area would need to be in the scenic corridor. And there could be about 7,000 square feet of community space and a playground north of that easement. So an affordable housing project like this would likely need to be developed with a nonprofit housing developer that specializes in these types of projects. Since the town owns the site, the town would have more control over the design and how it would be developed. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's patience during that presentation. We're going to move into small breakout rooms to get your feedback. You'll see a window pop up that asks you to join a Zoom room, and we'll have about 40 minutes to discuss some questions. And when we reconvene, each facilitator will recap briefly. And this is a reminder to facilitators to please hit the record button once you enter your breakout room. I think Alyssa is working on that right now.
All right, dropping everyone in.
Thank you.
Hello, is anyone having an issue getting into their breakout group? I'm going to try to assign some of you folks. So keep an eye out for any sort of pop-up that indicates that you are being moved to a breakout group. Give me 1 second. Hello, if anyone's having any issues getting into their breakout group, please feel free to unmute yourself and let me know if there's an issue. I can try to reassign you and you should see a pop-up.
Hello?
Hi, sorry
This is
that you're
Dan.
having some technical issues.
I've been following everything and suddenly I'm out.
Okay, let me see if I can re-add you to the group. Give me one
Put me
moment.
anywhere.
Were you able to get into a breakout room to start with?
I don't know. I don't think I went that far, but
Okay,
riding this thing along for years and suddenly I am out of contact.
all right, give me 1 second to find you. I'm going to move you to a group. You should see a pop-up on your iPad that tells you that you're being moved to a certain group, and you can click that and should be able to hop in.
Awesome, thank you.
You should be seeing that now.
Not that. There. Planner Partners, Inc. No, there.
That is me
That's you.
talking to you. You don't see a, why don't I try, I'll put you in the waiting room and bring you back into the meeting. Sometimes
Okay.
it's just a glitch. Give me 1 sec.
Hello.
Hello, are you also
Hi.
having issues getting into a room?
Yeah, I actually just joined the call, so
All right,
I'm
let
not
me
sure
just
what I'm
assign
supposed.
you.
Okay.
I'll assign you right now and you should receive a pop-up.
Okay, thank you.
See. Dana, are you still not seeing a pop-up on your end? Hi, everyone. Just wanted to reiterate again, if you are still waiting in this main room and are having issues getting into a breakout room, please let me know, and I can try to help you troubleshoot that. Feel free to unmute yourself. Hi, Dana. Sorry you're still having issues. Let me try to reassign you one more time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Can you
Okay.
hear us?
Yes, thank you. All right, so I am
Yep.
going to start our recap process. I hope everyone had fruitful discussions. And I am going to start my share out for my group. But thanks again for everyone's participation. I'm going to try to limit myself to 90 seconds just because I know we have a lot of groups to go through. So give me one moment. Time myself here. All right, so for our group, for the first question related to site selection, some of the concerns brought up are that more town-owned properties really should be included if possible. There was also discussion over not agreeing with voluntary or involuntary upzoning. I think there was one person who mentioned that they were not happy about the scenic corridor being a portion of the Ford Field, so any development in that area. Also just thinking through the height, and this kind of gets into questions 2 and 3 as well, but really trying to limit the density in that first triangle came up in our group several times. So encouraging only up to 2 stories in that area. Related to questions 2 and 3 in terms of design features and zoning standards, we discussed keeping height to no more than 2 stories, making sure that future development follows the general plan strictly, that there needs to be tasteful design, so color scheme, materials, things like that really need to be done thoughtfully. Preserving the scenic corridor, that came up a number of times. And in terms of the ADU, there's definitely questions and wanting more clarity around the amnesty program. We talked quite a bit about whether we could increase the number of ADUs or JDUs to be counted, given that some of them just needed to be included in that amnesty program. So we can definitely address that in our FAQ sheet. But I am going to pause there and hand it over, I think, let me hand it over to Leslie, if that's okay. You're there, Leslie.
Okay. All right. My group on the sites, one of the participants said actually her property was listed, but they actually had just wanted more information and were not committing to being on that opt-in list. There were concerns about the Ford Field site and loss of the 2 large trees that are there, and how that would work if there's adequate infrastructure there, and how that would work with but having bus service. On the Georgia Lane site, there was concern about the use of that area for children to ride their bikes to the school, and how that additional units there would impact that. And concerns that increased density, with increased density anywhere in town, there were concerns expressed about that in general, and then specifically on the Nat Horse site, and then concerns about density bonus and what that could really result in. So that's the sites question. On the upzoning of single family properties to allow 6 dwelling units per acre, comments included that small cottages would blend in better, and that the general plan has a lot of the parameters that should be included, and so we don't need to reinvent them. There's things about the 2 stories, setbacks, and so on. And then multifamily development on Alpine Road. Again, the same items that are already covered in the general plan, a maximum of 2 stories, and looking at the volumes, evacuation considerations, and also infrastructure. And then on the ADUs, suggestions for tax credits or some other financial incentives so that more ADUs could be spread out, and as opposed to higher density development in just a few places. And need to also look at infrastructure and how evacuation would be impacted as well. And also that the general plan has additional great ideas for how that should be governed. And that's it for my group.
Thanks, Leslie. I'm gonna turn it over to Alexia. Just a reminder, we're gonna keep these short and sweet, but we will have detailed meeting summary notes after this.
Probably help if I unmuted myself. Thanks, Carla. Sure. For question number 1, my group had some concerns regarding how the sites were identified in relation to safety criteria and the weighting of fire maps. There were concerns that the site and identification process was not being done completely holistically. And just evacuation routes were a main concern. Another topic people would prefer to see, or were commenting on, the dispersal of sites. They mentioned communities like Woodside and Atherton, who relied more on ADU and SB9 approaches to meeting their RENA requirements, and thought that would be a better dispersal of sites than multifamily along Alpine Road, and just concerns about preserving the scenic rural character of the community. In terms of design standards for the single-family properties at 6 dwelling units per acre, setbacks would be preferred, and to reiterate, cottage townhome style housing would be preferred and would fit more into the community and provide for more openness with development. They definitely want to see compliance with the night sky ordinance, single-story construction, limits on common lighting that would affect the night skies, and the usage of natural building materials and regulations regarding signage. There were concerns regarding the noise ordinance and how housing sites would comply with that, the town's existing ordinance, as well as how the upzoning sites would take into account utility constraints such as water and septic. For the multifamily sites along Alpine, setbacks were brought up as well to Alpine Road, but as well as the riparian corridor. There was a lot of concerns about how Alpine Road is considered a scenic corridor, but is proposed for the multifamily uses, and just more concerns regarding evacuation routes. Questions regarding the Ford Field site and its designation as open space in prior discussions, and now is proposed for housing. And the town would like to see, in addition to affordable rental properties, they would like to see ownership opportunities as well at affordable levels for persons. As far as the ADUs, we did bring up pre-approved ADU plans, but also streamlining the process in terms of not just building plans, but and architectural permits, but for utility connections, which seem to be a roadblock for a lot of people trying to bring an ADU online. I don't want to ramble too much, but
Thanks, Alexia.
yeah.
All right, let me hand it over to Hannah. I think we're averaging about 2 minutes, so good job.
My bad.
That's okay.
So for the first question, there was definitely some concern about upzoning in general, and a question about whether we can bring the buffer down to 15% instead of 20. Again, general concern about the amount of density and the parking that would be needed along the scenic corridor, and the idea to back. There was some concern that Glen Oaks would not be able to serve the workforce, such as teachers or firemen or police. It would only be serving the staff of Stanford, which was concerning to some. Some things like oak trees and just the green corridor in general are very important to the town's history. So some people were hoping that we can be able to both build the new housing, including at Ford Field, but still keep the heritage trees. There was some concerns about safety, especially because the fire map is old and we don't have evacuation study available yet. So we want to make sure that we can get everyone out in a state of emergency. And there was also concern about the opt-in upzoning, worried that these areas will pop up all over the place. And there was an idea or a question if it would be possible to move the baseball field somewhere else so we could develop even denser housing there. For question 2, there was general concern over the 6 units per acre and hope that we could consider 4 instead. But generally for the design features, people wanted it to be unobtrusive to the neighbors and using appropriate landscaping to soften or hide the existing buildings, which would help the rural aspect and the feeling of the communities. And that would make it less important for the building features themselves. For question 3 on the new multifamily zoning standards, again, generally want to keep the feeling of the community to maintain the rural atmosphere and maintain the heritage trees, and also to maintain the scenic corridor setbacks. And then for ADUs, we got a bunch of good ideas. Some people mentioned the pre-approved ADUs like Oakland has, considering whether or not we would require sprinklers because that adds a lot of cost. Help determining how much people's taxes will go up if they added an ADU. General support of homeowners through the process beyond the office hours, and incentives for homeowners. Also some options for prefab homes and support for the amnesty program. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. How about you, Evan? Can you go next?
Yeah, sure. A lot of stuff that's already been said. Let's see if I can add some new material here. There was some concerns about the Stanford Wedge not providing enough parking and being combined with the Ford Field development, just in general, not enough parking in that area. Several people voiced concerns about higher density housing being an impediment during a potential fire evacuation or another emergency evacuation, and general traffic concerns. Some people did like the diverse approach, though, to upzoning that the town is considering. For design features, some suggestions would be 2-story limits, including parking, in general, having like physical standards, pretty nice. So some visual standards, townhouses. And for question 3 around Alpine Road, multifamily, one idea was to be sure to, how do we deal with like trash and utilities, and can those be enclosed so that they're not out in the open? And there was another suggestion around minimizing lighting for the Dark Skies Consortium regulation. For ADUs, some pre-approved plans, any sort of ways to reduce costs. And there's interest in the amnesty program. And there's some conversation about whether the amnesty program could be used to meet the RENA requirements.
Thanks, Evan. So we have 4 more facilitators. So thank you for bearing with us. I know we're a little bit after 8:30. Let me hand it off to Melvin next.
Great, thank you. So my group was concerned about the site inventory for the following reasons. One is that fire is still a major safety concern for them. And there's uncertainty about the feasibility of the sites given the existing fire risk and the nature, the status of where we are in our fire mapping. There was a general concern about the number of units and that they felt that that would be a drastic change. But they also acknowledged that this is a state mandate and it's something that we have to do. And they commended the Housing Element Committee and the town for doing the best that we can with what we have. And there's also a desire for us to explore additional properties that could be part of this inventory. There was one specific property mentioned, I believe, in the West Ridge area that is 3.2 acres that could be used. As far as design features for unzoned properties, they emphasize that structures need fire sprinklers. We need sufficient setbacks so that new properties can sit quietly into the existing environment. And also brought forth the idea of existing structures that might be multifamily, like a 6-unit structure, but it fit in with the existing design of Portola Valley. And, to someone driving by, it might look like a regular single-family home. Considering specific things that multifamily zoning standards, what should be considered, there was a concern about roads and traffic, particularly how travel times will be impacted if we add additional vehicles to the road from multifamily housing. And there's also emphasis that the evacuation study needs to be completed and considered as we make these decisions about multifamily housing, how evacuation will be impacted. And finally, the ADU questions. There was a recommendation to explore whether a deed restriction, particularly a time-limited deed restriction for affordable housing, would count toward the RHNA numbers. And there was also support for amnesty programs. That's it.
Thanks, Melvin. Javier, can we have you go next?
Sure. And given that we are past time, I'm going to try to make this quick, but capture the sentiment of our discussion. So for question 1, there was concerns about the traffic associated with higher density. There's some discussion about maybe considering public lands as an option, such as community center. For question 2, there was concerns about parking, especially considering that there's a lot of cars associated with developments, whether that's the residents, but it's also sort of the services that serve the residents. There's also consensus amongst the group that the voluntary upzoning needs to be removed as an option. And if it can't be removed, that there needs to be a more thoughtful process for what sites get to opt into this. But there was consensus in my group that it should be removed. Public lands. And then for question 3, there's also discussion about the importance of sort of parking again. There's sort of the idea that people don't want to be looking at a parking lot. Let's see. There's also a sentiment shared that there's a desire to see more young families moving in here, so providing more options to allow that to happen. And then question 4 we discussed only briefly, but the discussion centered around that the process of getting an ADU approved currently is very long and expensive.
Thanks, Javier. And Curtis, how about you?
Well, I think my comments will be very similar to comments you've heard. I think there was concern looking at the sites, concern in general about upzoning those opt-in properties. There was particular concern raised around Barrett Gulch, the Shawnee and Nathorst sites in particular. Getting comments feeling that the town should look again at public owned sites. In addition to the criteria the committee looked at, school safety was also mentioned. That should be some part of the consideration. Folks felt that the site should be spread more around town than they are. And then there were some specific comments on some of the specific sites at the Nathorst site, particularly about cars during school hours. It's part of a key evacuation route, and there is some high density already in that area. So concerns about that. Regarding design, People felt that the height should be kept low profile. There was mention even of having flat roofs, keeping the buildings as far away from property lines as possible. Mention in this group about lighting as well. Also concerns about parking and traffic, feeling that 6 units on an acre is too many for privacy and other concerns. There was some questions about whether the existing homes would be on a site would be retained or whether they would be torn down. And also what would the square footage be per unit on the upzoned properties. Regarding multifamily, screening is very important. Both natural screening and sound screening, and how that is done is important, and the views that the surrounding neighbors would have of that site, what people would see. Maintaining the feel of the town is important, and the screening can be beneficial from that. Setbacks from the street, protecting the scenic corridors. And on the Ford Field site, there was a specific comment that from at least one individual about moving the buildings to the front. So you see buildings as opposed to parking lots as you're driving down the street. For ADUs, like the other groups, amnesty was important. Comments that the process needs to be streamlined, that it's taking too long. Again, comments about pre-approved ADU designs, prefab designs that could be utilized, providing more clarity on the process, and somebody on staff or staff that could be a resource when people have information. And then a comment, it was brought up during ADUs, but I think it was meant for some of the others questions as well, is really hopes this doesn't become a neighbor versus neighbor approach, wants to see people being able to work together.
Thanks, Curtis. Our last facilitator is Daisy. Bring it home for us if you're still there. I know she's having connectivity issues earlier. Might have lost her. Okay, well, I'll see if we can reach her, but I do have a few more slides. I just want to close us out for tonight. Now, thank you again, everyone, for your thoughtful feedback. Our next steps to getting towards this draft housing element is to release for public comment for 30 days towards the end of this month. We do have a meeting scheduled with the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee again, as well as Planning Commission and Town Council during that 30-day comment period. And afterwards, we will incorporate revisions into the document and then submit to HCD for a 90-day review period. The draft safety element is also scheduled to be issued this spring, and a community meeting will follow on that draft element. And a third housing element community meeting is planned for the fall once we receive comments back from HCD. So that next ad hoc committee meeting is scheduled for May 24th, and we anticipate study sessions with the Planning Commission and Town Council in June. We also ask that you take a brief exit survey here. We can drop that in the chat for you as well. And that just helps us identify any additional questions that you have about this process so that we can make sure to incorporate into that FAQ. Let me see if there's one other slide here on how to stay involved. Very important. If you haven't already, please sign up for housing element notifications. There's a little screenshot here, but if you go to portolavalley.net /community. Go to that stay informed. You will see the selection here where you can subscribe to town e-notices and select housing calendar and housing news. Just want to make sure everybody is signed up for that. And that concludes my PowerPoint. It looks like Melissa dropped in the exit survey in the chat. I would really appreciate everyone should just take a minute or two of your time, but it would help us in the future. I don't suppose Daisy joined again, did she? I'm sorry about that, the final group.
Is there going to be an opportunity for any in-person meetings at any point? Or is it all going to be Zoom?
At this point, I don't think we know yet.
Well, the council meetings are in person. The ad hoc housing element committee does not meet in person.
Thanks for that.
Really appreciate
And that council meeting will be ahead of the submittance to California, to the HCD.
Correct. The draft is not submitted until after that meeting.
And just, I don't know if this is the proper form or not. I can do it via email or nothing after, but I had a couple other quick comments I thought about while people were talking. Close attention to FARs. And then if developments are awarded to affordable developers in some area, preference should be given to a developer who has a stake in the community and not necessarily just 100% nonprofit. The public-private partnerships work very well, and I've actually done about 20 of these deals myself. So I would love to be very closely in tune if anything does go forward with these sites.
Thank you for that input. I know we're over time here, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's evening, but really appreciate you all joining us on a Monday night. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon. See you in a few weeks.
Thank you all for doing it.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You.